Good morning everybody and welcome to another video here on the channel. Today we're working on the Camaro. Now that the car is up and running, gotta make sure that it's safe to drive on the roads. Especially since it has been sitting this long, there are just certain routine maintenance things that you should go over, because the last thing you want to do is put this thing on the road and have something majorly fail for you. Also, there are other problems with this car that I just want to go over and make sure are okay. For example, the switches on both doors, your lock and unlock, as well as the mirror adjustment, aren't working. And on third gens, that is a different fuse than the one that controls your powered windows, which the windows work with the switches here. All the other switches that are lock and unlock do not work, however, most likely is a bad fuse. Now, if you're unfamiliar with third gens, the fuse block is underneath the console on the driver's side. So here's your hood latch release. It is right under here. There is a plate that you remove, which I've already done because, to be honest with all of you, I've already looked and this fuse is in fact broken. So if you look up here, just by the numbers at the very, very top left towards the door, that's number 1. And as you go through, you have 1, 2, 3, 4. You continue through. So we have 9, 10, space number 11, which says ACC. So a 20 amp fuse most likely has to go in there. This is the fuse that was in there, which was a 25 amp, which is broken. So since that says 20, I'm gonna put a 20 in, make sure everything works, and go from there. By the way, before you do any electrical work on any car, always make sure your battery is disconnected. As you can see, the ground terminal has been removed, so there is no power running to the vehicle. That is always step number 1 when you do any electrical work, because you just got to be safe. You don't want to electrocute yourself, and you don't want to damage your system, especially on a car that is over 30 years old at this point. So let's go ahead. We're going to look under here. Yeah, so that does say 20, and previous owner, like I said, had a 25, if that's the right way. Yeah, it is, which is blown, most likely because you put the wrong size in. So we're gonna grab a 20 amp and we're gonna put that in space number 11. Cool. Let's go through, let's check the rest. Okay, that's connected, and that's a good sign, because that bulb was not working before, so it could have blew out. Let's check. Look at that. Let's see if this might not work. Look at that. So those were all the switches that were not working on the car. Initially, I thought maybe a switch or two was bad, but once I realized that all of them didn't work, definitely saw that it was a fuse problem. Also, you might hear a bunch of noise in the background. They decided to dig a hole in my street without giving any warning to any of us, because you know that's what they do from time to time. So like I mentioned before, tires, always want to make sure that they are not expired. Believe it or not, tires can expire, and if you look at the DOT code, it'll show you when they were built. Since this car was sitting for a decade, yeah, those tires are done. You could also see because they were dry rotted. So now have some General G-Max RS tires. These are a 245/50 ZR16, which according to Tire Rack is not the stock size that came on the 92 RS. However, the stock size only gave me one option, and I wasn't a big fan. Thanks to everybody on third gen forums on Facebook and everything else. They said if you go to a 245/50 ZR16, it gives you some more options and works just fine. You're not gonna have to deal with rubbing or anything like that. And they were right. Got a ton of options and decided to go with the General G-Max because this is a performance summer tire. This car is not going to be seeing any inclement weather like snow or rain, unless of course I am at a car show and it starts raining and gotta get the car home. Otherwise, this car is gonna be driven on nice days where there is nothing but the sun in the sky and maybe a couple clouds, but lighter clouds. So now that all of that's done, it's time to do fluid checks. Oil change, coolant flush, those are the two main things that I am going to try and do today. The coolant flush is going to be priority number 1 because it's a bit more time consuming, and because when I checked that oil dipstick, it looked like the oil was pretty clean. However, It's always good to be safe than sorry. All right, so back end is up in the air, and I'm gonna pause right there because the previous owner stated that they put a Z28 rear on this thing, so it had 4 discs as well as posi traction. So let's go ahead and test to really confirm that this has posi traction. So step number 1, make sure that you chalk the wheels up front so the car doesn't go anywhere. Step number 2, take your key and put the car in neutral. I go in here, don't start it, just turn it, and then put the car in neutral. Now you can check to see. So if I learned anything from my cousin Vinny when I was younger, it was about posi traction.
What is posi traction?
It's a limited slip differential which distributes power equally to both the right and left tires. The 64 Skylark had a regular differential, which anyone who's been stuck in the mud in Alabama knows. You step on the gas, one tire spins, the other tire does nothing.
So you can see both tires there. I'm gonna spin the wheel. And the other is also spinning. A little bit of a click sound, sounds like it's coming from the drive shaft. It could also be because this back end is coming down, it's sagging down a bit, it's not at ride height. So that could be off a little bit, but yeah, looks like we have posi traction. The other thing I noticed is that this car has subframe connectors. That is something that a lot of 3rd gen owners do. It's a unibodied car, so there is a ton of flex that occurs when you're just driving this car. So subframe connectors, that is a really great upgrade that's on this thing already. Don't have to worry about that. Just kind of make sure everything is locked up. You don't have to worry about your steering box cracking, which is also common on 3rd gens. So that's really cool. Taking a look while the back end is up, it's looking like there's an Elderbrock panhard bar across the back, which is dope. So you have subframe connectors going on either side. You have the panhard bar. When Mark came out to help with the cap and the spark plug wires, he mentioned that these sway bars on both the front and the back are from a Z28 because of the thickness of them. So that would be really dope. And it would also make sense if this is a Z28 rear already with posi. That looks fairly new. It's in pretty good shape. The bushings for the sway bar also looks like they're in really good shape. They're not dry rotted or anything else. So that's cool. Might want to grease them up. There's grease access points. So can make sure that those are greased so they're not drying out. Now the exhaust on this car, I forget, the owner told me what he put on it, but I really don't remember. And it's not marked. Not sure if it was MagnaFlow, if it would be marked. I'm pretty sure it would be though. Either way, he did exhaust work. It's got Hedman headers on it as well. So there has been work done to this car, which is pretty great. So that's cool. Able to see upgrades done to the car. Now it's time to get that front end up so we can drain the coolant. All right, so now that the car is up in the air, remove the cap for the radiator. With these old style ones, you actually lift this up and it removes any of the pressure in the system out. When I did that, a lot of coolant came out and went into the reservoir here. Looking at it, it's pretty green. It's got a little discoloration in there, however, and there is discoloration of the coolant that did drain out. So what I need to do first is get to the petcock down there, and look at that. There's a Wonder bar up here too. You can see the gray bar. That's your front anti-sway bar. This black bar right here is that Wonder bar that came on IROC Camaros, which is also awesome. One less thing we got to worry about. Anyway, we got to get a drip pan under there. We have to get a container to catch all the coolant that's about to come out of this thing, and then go from there. Petcock is on the passenger side, and we'll put that there. The downfall with creepers, they're great because you can kind of roll around. However, you're a lot higher than you are if you're just on the ground lying down, so sometimes it's a little more complicated and difficult to get the things. And let this drip pan catch the rest that's seeping out. Now, as that continues to drain, there are two other plugs that Once that is drained, I'm gonna have to drain everything out of the block. On the V8s, there is one on either side. Same thing with the V6s. I don't think there was a 4-cylinder for 3rd gens. Could be wrong. Either way, this is my Bible, the Haynes manuals. I have one for the 3rd gen. I have one for the HHR too, if I could find it. And it's just a really good tool to have in your arsenal. If you are doing anything, you can cross-reference and check things. Obviously, you can look stuff up online as well, but if you are working on a garage, maybe you have spotty internet connection. Also, if you're covered in chemicals, the last thing you want to do is pull out your phone and have crap all over you. Mechanics do it all the time, but I'm not really a mechanic. I'm a drummer. Besides the point. This thing will help just kind of make sure that I'm doing this correctly, which pretty straightforward if you think about it. Drain everything out of the radiator, whatever you want to call it. Once that's done, remove the plugs on either side of the block. If I go underneath the car, might be able to see it from here, might not be. Nah, definitely can't. About halfway up the block on either side is the plug to remove the additional coolant out of the block. So it's gonna wait. It's getting pretty close. Hear it a little bit. All right, so like I said, halfway down the block on either side is exactly what we need. So there we go. Let me see if I can get my other arm around here so you can see. So this right here is the plug that needs to be removed. Doing so will remove the coolant from the driver's side. There's another cap on the passenger side that also needs to be removed. So got to do those two next, and that will get all of the coolant out of the system, and then we can go and flush. Here's the other thing. There are also sensors that you can pull for the heads to drain coolant as well. Here's the one right here. This is supposed to be a sensor for temperature readings. However, if you look carefully, here's the connection for it down here. And that doesn't fit on that type of connection because this is the right one. So another thing that we noticed when we started the car, anytime you would turn the car over, you'd see the temperature gauge pin all the way to hot once the car started, or if you stopped trying to turn it over, it would go all the way back to cool and wouldn't move from there. That's why. There is nothing being sent to it to send a signal. So kill two birds with one stone. Since we are draining coolant out of this system, we are going to remove this to make sure that we put the right one on and then go from there. It's at a point now where I can loosen it by hand, and we got nothing. So, and it looks like they put red RTV on it, so that's fun. So yeah, there's a little bit coming out, but not much. It's kind of just weeping out. So the system is pretty flushed at this point, I would assume, or at least drained at this point. We're gonna put this one in. Now I gotta make sure that this goes in straight. All right, so started it by hand. Obviously when thread lock starts to catch, you're gonna get a bit of resistance. And because this has that sensor connector on the end, you want to use open-ended wrench and just kind of work your way to get it tight. Not a whole lot of space here. Probably be a whole lot easier if I, remove that. Eventually this air intake will be replaced with an open air element, but once again, just trying to make sure what needs to get done to this gets done. This is where ratcheting wrenches come into play. You don't have to keep rotating back and forth. So I have a socket that is specifically made for temperature sensors. It's like in between a short and a long socket. So it's enough that you can get it on, but once again, like there's no way that you can fish socket wrench. So here I am, slowly and surely. Now, let's get that spark plug wire. Now, grab the sensor wire. It's done. All right, so now that all the coolant's out of it, as much as we think is out of it, One really awesome thing about this previous owner is that they had a ton of parts, including a new coolant reservoir compared to the old one right here. So looking in, there's a little bit of rust in there. It's not too bad, but there's something. So first thing I'm gonna do is remove this hose here and remove this tank itself. Now, to remove the tank, there is a screw right there, which I already took out. That's it there. Then, underneath in the wheel well, there is a bolt right here. It's holding the rest of the tank in. You can see from the new tank, there's the threading for it. So, just gotta get a socket to take that off, and then go from there. And wouldn't you know, 10 millimeter, of course it is. Fits right on. There we go. All right, so now that with both of those disconnected, the whole thing will come out. However, I'm gonna take this line too. This line is pretty corroded looking on the end there. Seen better days. So I have to run and get a piece of coolant hose for up here when I do this coolant flush. That way I don't have to cut the line. Yeah, you can cut the line, but I don't really want to. I'd rather get a new piece and just, you know, finagle it. Yeah, that's on there. That's pretty bad. So, because I'm gonna replace this, I'm gonna get a pick, try and pick that off for now. It's a 5/16 piece of line, so should be able to get that and then go from there. Now, as I get these picks, it's safe to say they're great. They also suck because regardless of how careful you are, you always end up stabbing yourself with them. So, whatever. This is so shot. Good Lord. There it is, done. That hose has seen better days. Just from a little bit of that pick, it just deteriorated and came apart, no problem. Anyway, there's still coolant in here, so I'm gonna just flip it up like that. So this is really easy to install. Find the thread and get it through the hole. That's step one. Make sure everything lines up with the other side, which it does. So the screw and washer that holds that in place, put that in first and tighten it up. New reservoir, that's pretty sweet. And look, I can pick and choose. Well, not washer fluids, obviously. There's an engine coolant cap. Is there another one in here? No, there's just a bunch of washer fluid caps. So here's a brand new washer fluid reserve. There's a bunch of washer fluid only caps. There's more, yeah, look, see, more engine coolant caps. The washer fluid reservoirs, and then look, brand new RS logos for the doors. That's pretty rad. It's pretty dope when previous owners have a bunch of stuff like that. All right, so just to make sure that contaminants don't get in there. Oh, look at that, nice and fresh and clean. All right, so these are disconnected. Now, a lot of folks will say, hey, just drain the coolant, put new coolant in, you're set to go. The reason why I'm doing a flush, one, because I don't really know the history of this car. Two, that is some pretty gross residue, along with the residue that was in the old coolant reserve. Safe to say, these are cast iron blocks, that they rust. So you wanna make sure that that's not really running through your system. That can gunk up over time and cause issues. So this is now disconnected. That line looks pretty solid. So let's see here. All I need now is, it's actually a piece of 5/8 hose, which is what was attached to this in the first place. So I just need a piece of 5/8 hose so I can connect this end to here. Keep that pretty straight. And then I can do the flush. Okay, so now that we are back, we have some extra 5/8 hose. We have new 5/16 hose. I asked for 2 feet because I'd rather have more than not enough, and cut to size. So with this extra 5/8 hose, you want to put the connection for your water hose going from your engine block, which is this line right here, because if I fish that, or if I run my hand around it, it leads to the block in the back right there. So it looks like it comes from the block, it goes in this connection here, and then the top line goes down and it splits. One of them goes to the radiator and the other one goes back to the heater core. The one on the bottom goes straight to the heater core. So gotta cut this little piece here, so then that way I can connect this to this. So I just have to cut a little bit off. I mean, there's the connection, so probably have to cut it like right there, so I can connect there. Then we can start the flushing process. So now that that is done, it's a piece of 5/8 hose, you have the clamps. Oh, gotta do another one. That could be a big problem. That's why you have a second one right here. So might as well have you guys be part of this fun journey. Now that that's all connected, we'll just go like this. Go. That is in place properly and easy to get to. Now, one thing to keep in mind is you don't want to go too tight with these because they are clamping down on plastic, which can collapse on itself. Okay, so we now have that T in place from the block into this, which then goes wherever it has to go. So we also have this backfill in place. All right, I also had a weird hunch. That is the thermostat housing. I disconnected it. That's all rust, which is no good. So when you're talking about flushing a system, some people say there's one of two things you can do. Get your car up to operating temperature, so that way your thermostat's open, and then do the coolant flush. That's, I don't know, that's dancing with the devil if you ask me, because hot coolant and no. Here's what I am gonna do. I'm gonna remove the thermostat, because if there's no thermostat, you now have an open channel to flush and go through the other part of your system. So I'm gonna remove these two bolts, and there we go. Do that. There we go. That's the gasket for the thermostat. And then here's the thermostat itself. Still cooling in that block, which is interesting because I removed the drain and didn't see anything come out from the bottom of the block. So that's pretty gross. Now, what I need to do is put this back. There we go. Okay, so we're gonna put that back on. All right, so here we go. Everything is set up and open. That's all connected. You're supposed to run this until that's clear, which could take up to 3 to 5 minutes. Quite some time. You can see there's a lot of coolant coming out. Makes a mess. Well, it's still green. Getting closer. Still green though. So we're gonna let this keep doing its thing. Done. Next step is blocked off the hose that goes from the T to the block, and now that'll flush out the heater core. All right, getting pretty close now. So let's undo that. All right, well, as that's all draining out, let's go ahead. We got to put the thermostat back. Still got to flush everything out of that block, which means that's where those two fittings on the bottom are going to come into play to get that out. Because if that is coming out, it's coming out real slow.
Approximately 10 hours later.
Found one of the problems. There was so much buildup. So here we go. Which one? This one, right here, was what was in the block on the passenger side. And there was a bunch of sediment there, and I was like, well, that's kind of gross. So I took a pick. As soon as I broke loose, all of the coolant that was inside that is now draining out coolant, water, everything else. Whew, that's exciting. It's also very nerve-wracking because of the fact that I didn't have my hat on. So, you know, coolant showers are the best, but what are you gonna do? The dirty job, right? Either way, I'm gonna let that drain out, wait for that to fully drain out. I'm gonna do the same thing on the other side because when I took both of them out, nothing came out at all. So shows that there was sediment, there was a lot of buildup. It looked like the bolt was broken off. That's how thick it was in there. And I just went around the perimeter of it and it just all broke and crumbled apart. So it's definitely not the bolt. You can also look and see that although I did put some Teflon tape on there, that's not broken off. So it's just gross as hell. Yeah, so we're gonna let that do its thing and off we go. So just getting under here because, you know, I like crawling under cars. Older GM vehicles, the coolant is green. You guys saw that earlier when we were doing the flush. That is not green. That is rust, but it's good to get it out of the system. Our coolant went from green to this. So, gotta make sure that that hole is cleaned out, and I have to do the same thing on the other side. See through here. Oh yeah. There we go. Gross, right? Yeah, buddy. Buy a classic, they said. It would be fun, they said. This actually is a ton of fun. Just losing a little daylight because, you know, family always comes first, and wanted to make sure that, one, I got my kids, and two, had dinner with them. And number three, wanted to make sure I was there when my wife put my son down and I put my daughter down. All right, so while that's happening, I'm going to put the sensor, the temp sensor that I took out of the head on this side, I'm gonna put that in just because, again, daylight, losing it, gotta keep going. All right, one jug down, one more to go. Now with older GM vehicles, you're using original green coolant, which I am using Verex by Valvoline. It's just a 50-50 blend. So then that way I don't have to measure anything. I can just be lazy. Pour it all in. 1 gallon is already done. This is the 2nd gallon here. And done. Nighttime. Shouldn't take this long to do that, right? That's what happens when you have to get certain things like line. You go to your local parts store and they don't have it, so you have to go to another one that's 30 minutes away and then come back. Anyway, it's done. So now I have to get that car off the jack stands, get it back in the garage. I'll throw a drip pan under it just to make sure, go from there. So thank you so much for checking out this video. Next steps with the Camaro is to do a oil change. That's super straightforward. That's not gonna take all day. Then I also wanna replace all the brake fluid. That's gonna be another job because I wanna drain all of the brake fluid out and put new brake fluid in. And again, it's gonna involve me just getting the car up on jack stands and all of that. But anyway, if you enjoyed this video, please make sure that you give it a thumbs up. Thank you so much for checking it out. And until next time, see you later.